Hola, year nine. So good to be back with you after a really glorious half term. I genuinely hope you got out, you enjoyed the sun, that you were able to relax. But the reality is, guys, we're going to be continuing the remote learning and up until the end of term. Okay, you won't be part of the year groups called back into school. And that does have an implication, which means we're beginning with this new topic to introduce your GCSE content. Now, in the past, we've in college always done this. We've always begun GCSE content at the end of year nine. So I just need you to hear that. Okay, so I'm going to say it once more. This new topic is directly linked to and a part of our GCSE course. However, we've switched it around rather than the poetry, which has a higher value in terms of what it contributes to your overall grade. We're going to wait till we have you back in class with us. We're going to introduce this topic. Now, it says here rhetoric and persuasion. Now, this is a key topic that is part of your GCSE course, and the outcome does contribute towards a speaking and listening GCSE grade. Okay, so that's really important that the outcome of this topic does contribute towards a speaking and listening GCSE grade. But we're going to use the remainder of this half term to introduce the topic to give you plenty of time, plenty of practice, so that it's a positive contribution to your GCSE grade, okay? You're not going to risk any damage, any kind of negative impact on your GCSE grade. Because we're going to talk you through it, and if you work with us at each stage, you're going to be able to produce and contribute to your GCSE speaking and listening grade in a really positive way. Okay, so we do need new topics. So if you're working in your English books, put a line under what we've done before. And our topic is rhetoric and persuasion. Okay, now rhetoric, even and persuasion, okay, come into two parts. They come into the GCSE speaking part of the exam and in what we call English language paper 2. Now, the difference being, in one part, you're assessed on your ability to write and speak using rhetoric and persuasion. And in the paper 2 exam, you're assessed on your ability to unpack maybe how somebody else uses rhetoric and persuasion and to write using rhetoric and persuasion. Okay, so this is a really key area for us, but we can introduce it in a really gentle way. So we're using our time wisely, but we can also recognize that it's not going to have as high stake impact as, say, if we were doing the poetry or Macbeth or one of the other key topics that is also a part of your GCSE. Okay, guys, so rhetoric and persuasion. Now, it says here we're on week 7, session 1 of home learning. Isn't that scary? How time is flying by. So if you like titles, rhetoric and persuasion is the overarching title. And this week we're looking at week 7, session 1. Now, our big question, okay, what are the origins of rhetoric? We're going back to the beginning. We need to establish a foundation, a bedrock of knowledge. And what we need in our knowledge banks is an answer to this question. What are the origins of rhetoric? In other words, what does rhetoric mean? I've used that word several times. We're going to make sure we understand what that means. And what are its origins? How did it begin? Okay, so hopefully you've written that down as your title. What are the origins of rhetoric? So what are the origins of rhetoric? What is the beginning of rhetoric? Now, it might help if we had a look at this question together. Okay, so to understand where rhetoric came from, we need to understand something else. Now, we need to get our head around this key concept of democracy. Now, democracy is something we've grown up with. Okay, we are a democratic country. Okay, but actually it is really old. Okay, to understand the power and purpose of rhetoric, you first need to understand what democracy is, because rhetoric is a characteristic of democratic society. In other words, if you're a democratic society, there's a good chance there's people wandering around you using rhetoric. Okay, and there's a good chance that the people wandering around you using rhetoric are at the top of the democratic chain. So, is it a term you're used to hearing before? Do you have any existing knowledge of what democracy might mean? You might have actually seen it with our current kind of climate at the moment, with the news and things. It's a concept that people are coming back to question and to look at again in light of current events. So what is democracy? So as I read this, I'm going to ask you to pause in a minute and write it down. But democracy then is a system of government by the whole population. Or, now this, I should have highlighted this or, because this is a big or all the eligible members of a state, typically through elected representatives. So in other words, a democracy is from the ancient Greek times. Okay, so that's a little clue where the democracy come from, ancient Greece. And it means demos kratia. Okay, there's my Greek for you. Demos kratia, the people power. Now, guys, I am all for people power, okay? And I believe fundamentally in the concept of a democracy. But the truth is, that little or there, can you see it? It makes a distinction between, in some places, the whole population, everybody can contribute to the democracy or the democratic process, or eligible members of a state get to contribute to the democratic process. So, in other words, if we're looking at the UK, okay, our current democratic setup means that in order to be eligible to be a part of the democratic process, you have to be 18. Okay, you have to not be in prison. But if you're over 18 and you're not in prison and you are a citizen of this country, so you have British citizenship, you're eligible. That means you have a right to vote. You have a right to contribute to the democratic process. You are a person with power. But that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because your power isn't automatically based on just being a person, just being a human. Your power is tied into meeting certain criteria. Now, we like to think of ourselves as quite a modern open democracy. Okay, men and women vote in our democracy. Anybody over the age of 18 can vote in our democracy. But there are certain things that you could do as a citizen to exclude yourself. So, for example, if you commit a crime and you're sentenced to prison, a term in prison, you lose your democratic vote. Similarly, if you're not a citizen, okay, so a citizen means that you have met the criteria to pass into British citizenship. So we're quite a modern democracy. We know we only just celebrated, though, 100 years of the female vote. So actually over 200 years ago, the eligible members of our state to be part of the democratic process wouldn't be men and women. Sadly, it would be men. And actually, the voting age would potentially be older than 18. You'd have to have a certain amount of money. You'd have to hit other criteria. Suddenly, a democracy is not so much about people power in the way we might want to think it is. The demoskratia is quite narrow. And actually, in ancient Greek, the demoskratia, the people power, although it was a really good socialist concept, was slightly flawed. Okay, so when we're looking at ancient Greek times, in order to have the power, to be a person of power, you had to be male, guys. So, no women. No women could vote in ancient Greece. And similarly, another sad moment, ancient Greek was a civilization founded on slavery, and you could not vote if you were a slave. You had to be a free man, you had to be a man, you had to be a citizen of Greece. So suddenly, this system of government put certain standards in to make you eligible, and those eligible standards can change. So, after listening to that, hopefully you've made some notes on what a democracy is. Write down our definition. So what's this got to do? Okay, so we need a little bit more of an understanding. You don't need to write this down. I just want you to listen to this bit. The term democracy first appeared in ancient Greek political and philosophical thought in the city-state of Athens. Okay, Athens was the center. Okay, so we're back in the city-state of Athens, and the word comes from demos, common people, and kratos, strength, the strength of the people, which, as I said, is a brilliant ideal, but in practice, it's not like that song. We want to be like Common People by Pulp. Common people actually meant male, particular age, particular standing, a citizen. So there were actually a lot of restrictions in place. But it was a really good idea, and it was better than what existed before. So led by Cleisthenes, Athens established what is generally held as the first democracy in 508 to 507 BC, so before Christ. So this is a really long established historical concept. So, if you are in a democracy, it suggests that you have to be elected. Okay, so in a democracy, the whole point of democracy is there are certain people that want to be elected, that want the power of the people to put them in a place of or a position of power. In other words, you need people to vote for you. You need people to get behind you. So rhetoric became a really important tool. Rhetoric became the tool by which men would present themselves to the people, and based on how well they could present themselves, their use of rhetoric end up getting voted. So let's copy this definition into your book, please. Rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking, the ability to persuade or influence others through language. In other words, within a democracy, how is person A going to get voted rather than person B? Through rhetoric, through the art of persuasion, through the ability to persuade or influence others through language. So practice saying it out loud. Rhetoric, rhetoric, rhetoric. The more you say it, the stranger it sounds. Rhetoric, rhetoric, rhetoric. Okay, my darling, so make sure you've written that down. Rhetoric. So the link between rhetoric and democracy, that in a democracy, people need to be voted in. They need to be elected. In order to stand out then alongside the competition, they would use rhetoric, persuasive speech making, persuasive speaking in order to get elected. Now, this has not changed, right? We're here 508 BC. We're now 2020, and exactly the same process is at work in our society today. Politicians will use rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking, in order to persuade me, not you because you're under 18, but your parents, etc., anybody over 18 to vote for them. Okay, so this suggests it works. Okay, if we're still using it today, if modern MPs, modern electives within a democracy are still using this, it works. Okay, so rhetoric, make sure you've written that down. Rhetoric, rhetoric. Brilliant. Okay, now you just need to listen to this, a little bit of history. Okay, I love a little bit of history. I've been watching Horrible Histories this half term with my family. Bit of a fan. So many historians credit the ancient city-state of Athens as the birthplace of rhetoric. So something always has to begin somewhere, guys, okay? Athens, beginning of democracy. Athens, beginning of rhetoric. So that kind of makes sense, yeah? Birthplace of rhetoric. A man's success, remember you had to be a man to be eligible to vote or to be voted in. A man's success and influence in ancient Athens depended on his ability to persuade other men to vote him into power. As a result of this, small schools dedicated to the teaching of rhetoric, persuasion, began to form. The men that formed these schools were known as sophists. The sophists would travel from city to city, teaching young men in public spheres how to speak and debate. They taught their students how to make a weak argument stronger and a strong argument weak. Sophists believed they could use language in the written or spoken word to win any debate on any subject, even if they had no prior knowledge of that topic. Now, guys, I don't know how much you watch the news, but although sophists don't exist today, spin doctors do. And governments, different political parties, so your Labour political party, Conservatives, Lib Dem, will actually invest a huge amount of money in speech writing, okay, in their spin doctors, in the people that have demonstrated incredible skill in this area. So again, this concept is not new, okay, but this is the beginning of that concept. Now, interestingly, I'm a bit of a cynic. So sophists, okay, recognize that there was a little bit of money, a little bit of power to be gained from being the best at using rhetoric, but also being the ones that could teach others. Because, you know, look at what somebody's selling to who's buying. So if men want to be voted in and be made successful, they're going to look to buy into the teaching of these experts, okay? So it's a bit like a mentoring scheme. Here they go, traveling around, selling the skills of rhetoric for a price, okay? And convincing students how to make a weak argument stronger and a strong argument weak. Now, interestingly, and I say that and genuinely mean it, my friend, this is actually her modern day job. She's not a sophist, but actually she is employed by Greenpeace and a lot of other big charities to look at how they use language to persuade people to give. Now, her particular focus is on how big charities talk to what they call their donors and help them and convince them to keep giving money. So again, I love this. So this is how that process began all those years ago with sophists, but we still see it at work today. Brilliant.